Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really high-stakes piece of history. We're going to look at exactly what happens when systemic corruption completely takes over a town and everyday ordinary citizens are pushed right to their absolute breaking point.
So I really want you to think about this question. What happens when the law itself becomes the criminal and citizens literally have nothing left to lose? It's kind of a chilling thought, right? To answer it, we're going to dive straight into the muddy, incredibly corrupt streets of 1946 in McMinn County, Tennessee.
Section 1. The Athens Political Machine.
Okay, so back in 1936, a wealthy guy named Paul Cantrell was elected sheriff, and his one big campaign promise? To abolish the corrupt fee system. This was a completely broken law where deputies were basically paid a cash fee for every single arrest they made. But get this, the second Cantrell won, he completely broke that promise. Actually, scratch that. He didn't just break it, he weaponized it. By 1942, he'd rigged enough elections to become a state senator, leaving his deputies behind to basically run the town. Fast forward a bit to 1946, and the battle-hardened GIs of World War II are finally returning home from the Pacific and Europe to a town they barely even recognize anymore.
$300,000. To put that into perspective, in today's money, that is roughly $5 million, stolen directly from the pockets of everyday citizens. Under Cantrell's machine, deputies were logging up to 115 arrests in a single weekend. I mean, they were arresting people for everything and nothing, just to collect those fees. It was basically a massive state-sanctioned extortion racket.
Section 2. The Battle of Athens.
So when these GIs returned, they received a lump sum from the government called mustering out pay. Well, Cantrell's deputies immediately targeted them, throwing them in jail on totally bogus charges just to drain that cash. In response, the veterans started meeting in secret. They realized they had to break the machine. This sparked the creation of a nonpartisan political party called the GI Ticket. The goal was super simple: run for office, kick Cantrell's men out, and finally hold a free and fair election. But, the machine wasn't exactly going to go quietly. Veteran Bill White warned his fellow GIs, saying, if you never got the guts enough to stand up and fight fire with fire, you ain't going to win. And man, he was absolutely right to be worried. To counter the veterans, Cantrell and his sheriff actually deputized 200 armed, out-of-state ex-convicts to act as his personal thugs for Election Day. The stage was totally set for a showdown. On August 1, 1946, Election Day arrives, and the corruption immediately turns violent. A black citizen named Tom Gillespie walks into his polling place and is flat out told by a corrupt deputy that he isn't allowed to vote. When Gillespie insists on his rights, the deputy beats him to the ground with brass knuckles. And as Gillespie tries to run away in a panic, the deputy draws his pistol and shoots him in the back. This was it. The visceral moment of no return. It proved to everyone in town that the election was a total violent sham. So by the end of the day, Cantrell's deputies had literally stolen the ballot boxes and taken them over to the county jail so they could be counted in private. Defeated, the veterans are just slumped in their chairs at their headquarters. And that's when Bill White delivers this furious reality check. He looks at these men who had survived Guadalcanal and Normandy, and shouts, "You let a bunch of draft dodgers push you around? Get your guns." And you know what? That is exactly what they did. By 9 p.m., the veterans had raided the local National Guard armory, loading up a truck with rifles and Thompson submachine guns. Relying on their military precision, they split into squads, took cover in the dark, and completely surrounded the barricaded jail, trapping Cantrell and 55 of his deputies inside. Now, for hours, bullets are just tearing through the walls of the jail. But at 2 a.m., the veterans see an ambulance pull up. Assuming it was there to treat the wounded, the GIs hold their fire. But instead, Cantrell and his sheriff use the medical vehicle as cover. They jump into the back and cowardly flee into the night, completely abandoning the hired thugs they had left trapped inside. By 3:30 a.m., the veterans decided they were ending the standoff. They literally taped sticks of dynamite together and hurled them at the jail. One blast completely destroys a deputy's car. Another blows a massive hole right in the roof of the jail. They blasted the building and the corrupt deputies into total submission. The deputies finally surrender. The veterans walk in, find the rigged ballots, and when they count the real votes, the GI Ticket wins every single race. But you want to know the most incredible takeaway from all this? Despite raiding a federal armory and using actual dynamite on a jail building,
0 veterans were ever charged with a crime. The town had successfully reclaimed its freedom.
Section 3. The Wyoming Cattle Monopoly.
So let's shift gears and go back in time a little bit. Wealthy cattle baron Frank Walcott and his friends had essentially discovered what you might call an infinite money glitch. Step 1, release your cattle onto massive stretches of public land. Step 2, let them graze and drink for free all year long. Step 3, round them up in the fall and cash in. Because they weren't paying a dime for land or feed, their profit margins were just astronomical. Now, Wyoming at the time was a land of extreme contrasts. On one side, you had the WSGA, the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. This was a group of untouchable elites sipping drinks at the exclusive Cheyenne Club. On the other side, thanks to the Homestead Act, you had this diverse wave of humble settlers moving west, Civil War veterans, freed slaves, and just everyday folks looking for a fresh start. These homesteaders began putting up fences, claiming land, and raising their own cattle, which, as you can guess, directly threatened the elite's loophole. Section 4, the Johnson County War. Seeing their profits threatened, the elites quickly weaponized the law. They pushed through something called the Maverick Act. See, on the open range, calves naturally got mixed up. This new law basically stated that any unbranded calf automatically belonged to the WSGA elites. It essentially turned every independent homesteader into a cattle rustler overnight. And on the frontier, cattle rustling was a crime punishable by death.
Things escalated horribly in 1889. A 29-year-old homesteader named Ella Watson was found with a few unbranded cattle. A WSGA mob shows up, completely skips the legal formalities, and lynches Ella and her husband from a tree. When the local sheriff actually tried to bring the murderers to trial, key witnesses began dying of mysterious poisonings, or they simply vanished. The elites had just legally gotten away with murder.
But the homesteaders weren't going to take it lying down. In 1891, an independent rancher named Nate Champion forms a rival cattle organization to break the WSGA monopoly. The elites were so enraged that they hired a heavily armed Texas hit squad called the Regulators. They handed them a 70-person kill list and put Nate Champion at the very top.
The Regulators tracked Champion down and besieged his cabin for an entire day. Champion fought fiercely, taking out 4 of the hitmen, but as the sun set, the mob set his house on fire. Through the thick smoke of his burning cabin, Champion wrote this absolutely chilling final journal entry. "The house is all fired. Goodbye, boys, if I never see you again." He tucked that journal into his pocket and charged out the door in a blaze of glory, where he was struck by 28 bullets. But here's the thing. Nate Champion's incredible final stand bought just enough time for word to reach the local town. A pro-homesteader sheriff named Angus rallied a posse of 200 men, and most of them were battle-hardened Civil War veterans. The script totally flipped. This was David versus Goliath, except David showed up with high-powered rifles. The Civil War veterans chased down the exhausted, elite-funded hit squad and trapped them inside a barn, pinning them down in a massive, overwhelming firefight.
Section 5. Did corruption actually win?
Well, the elites literally woke up the U.S. president in the middle of the night to send the cavalry to rescue their hit squad from that barn. Then they bought off the courts, resulting in 0 sentences for the murderers. The mastermind behind it all, Frank Walcott, even became a justice of the peace. But there is a silver lining here. The sheer scale of the armed resistance from Sheriff Angus and the veterans terrified the wealthy ranchers so much that many of them fled Wyoming forever. The WSGA's monopoly permanently collapsed, and they were forced to reform and start representing all cattlemen. Both the Battle of Athens and the Johnson County War explore the absolute extreme limits of societal endurance. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. When the justice system is entirely bought and paid for, is armed rebellion a crime, or is it a civic duty? Think on that for a bit. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.